We are going to talk a bit about, as a way of just an introduction, um, David Strauss's The Life of Jesus, which was published in Germany in 19th century, as does Leben, Jesu. Um, and in order to understand its importance of this book, we need to go back to a seminal figure in Western modern thought or modernity, or enlightenment to be specific. And that figure is Kant, Immanuel Kant. Probably it's the most important Enlightenment figure, because in his writing you find the first and the founding and important understanding of one of the most important strands in modernity, which is enlightenment. And one of the concepts which Kant gave us is that of autonomy, which we still have it. And it basically invented the concept of autonomy in this sense. And by autonomy, he meant self-determination. And we'll discuss that when we look at Kant, but by self-determination, Kant meant the self-determination, or by autonomy, the autonomy of an individual. And that, by that he means that an individual is his or her own master or lord. And that's the thing in which our humanity consists. So he talked about individual self-determination and individual autonomy. That's why he is one of the founding fathers of liberalism. At least this is one of the interpretation of Kant. The other one is Locke, obviously. And Kant but what is important in Kant is that for individual, for him, has dual aspects, or two part which is body and dealt with desires, and then there's a mind and reason. So by self-determination, you mean determination through our real self. So we have sort of two selves, lower self and higher self. Didn't want to actually do this much on Kant, but anyway, lower self is the self which consists of desires, and higher self is a rational self. So Kant divided self into lower self and higher self, and he equated a higher self with rational self. So self-determination, which he talks about, belongs to the higher self. And basically what Kant thinks is that humanity has a divine, basically individual has a divine element. So, which is a rational element. So, in a sense, humans are half divine and half animal. And so basically God is pure rationality. So, and that goes back to Aristotle, who defined God as. And so when we use our reason, we actually participate in the divinity. As we progress and we determine ourselves in society according to reason, we are becoming more and more divine, I guess. And that concept was basically, I mean, sort of transformation of Christianity, in the sense that Christianity gave us the idea of Jesus as Jesus who was a man, fully man and fully divine. And now Kant was saying that all of us are basically Jesus, in the sense that we are fully human and fully divine. So we are fully human or fully animal as far as we have our desires in our body, and we are fully divine as far as we are rational agent. And this thought was expressed in the idea of freedom. And when they talk about freedom, that's freedom from and freedom to. So freedom from any subjugation to anything else other than ourselves, because we are divine. And freedom to, like freedom to subjugate ourselves to our own reason. So that's what self-determination is. And this conception of freedom naturally, these all seminal figures like Kant, and we'll talk about Hegel and Strauss in a minute, they all came out of Protestant part of Europe, especially Germany, which was the citadel of Protestantism, because Protestantism basically talk about freedom of each and every Christian. So basically, your Christianity gave you the idea of divine come human, and then you go, everybody is divine come human. And Protestantism gives you the idea of that all Christians are free, they are not subjugated to the dictate of the church and other things. Freedom of individual Christians. So from there it's easy to universalize this to freedom of each and every individual. So that's what Kant did. So basically he gave us the idea of the divinity of each and every individual as long as we are rational. So that provides the content to the notion of freedom and content to the notion of self-determination. Okay, so one of the disciples of Kant, in a sense, is the greatest disciple of Kant, in a way, is Hegel. And Hegel carries with it Kant's notion, but he transformed it into something divinity. So Kant gave it to an individual, but Hegel says that it belongs to community or humanity. And what Hegel said was, in a nutshell, that God is not separate from nature. So in a sense, God is dormant in nature. And he gave a twisted logic to say that God is in nature, because he thought if God is separate from nature, then it would be limited by nature, and then God would be finite actually. So in order to not limit God, we need to keep him dormant in nature. And with the development of development of life, for example, within nature, is development of God in a sense, a manifestation of God. So God is basically evolving in that sense, or self-realizing, if not involving. And humanity is the highest form, not as an individual, but humanity as a species. That's where Marx get his idea of species being. Humanity is a manifestation of God, the highest manifestation of God to this date, and the development of humanity is basically development of God and self-realization of God. And as I said, this was made easy by Christianity through its conception of Jesus as a man and God, and then Protestantism through proclaiming the freedom of each and every Christian. And Hegel was always from Germany as well, and a Protestant. So now we come to basically David Strauss is a student of Hegel, or disciple of Hegel. There were many that were called young Hegelians. And then they divided into right Hegelians and left Hegelians, etc. So Marx is one of the left Hegelians, Feuerbach, Mach. So what Strauss did basically through his life of Jesus was to explore what Hegel had actually and made explicit what Hegel had written philosophically, and he said Jesus Christ was as a God, was a myth. The conception of Jesus Christ as a God was a myth, but that myth contained truth within it. And he basically, among other things, makes that truth explicit in various points. So what he's um, said was that the idea of Christ as a God and man is a myth, but it expresses the truth, and the first truth is the idea of the human species. So the God become man, and the infinite spirit so the conception of Jesus as a God expressed the idea that humanity or human species as God. So the truth which the idea of the myth of Christ as human, Christ as God, is that God the infinite spirit turned into glory in the sense that through that we get the idea that the human species is God. So it's not that Jesus is God, but this myth of Jesus as a God expresses the truth of at least the potential of humanity to become God. And the myth of God-man, so God-man, which is Jesus, was born from a real woman who's Mary, an invisible Father, the Spirit. So this myth expresses the idea of the synthesis of spirit and nature. So the first gives us the idea that humanity has a potential to become a god, and the idea of God-man gives who has come through a real woman and invisible father, and invisible father is spirit, gives us the idea of the synthesis of spirit and nature. So what we need is humanity to take its mantle as a potential God, and this will be done through the combination of nature plus human reason, which is a spirit in this. So that's the second point. Okay. And the third point this myth expresses is so the miracles which Jesus performed, he said, was myth. They were, but those myths contain truth within them. That spirit can control nature. And dominate and subjugate nature. Because what you do in spirit miracles is that nature succumbs to the human will. And now this becomes reason's subjugation of nature. So that's the true idea which we get from this myth. And Christ's miracles are myths, but they contain the truth that humans can human spirit or human reason can subjugate nature to its own will. And the fourth thing he drew from this myth is myth of Christ sinlessness. So he is a sinlessness. He is pure. Christ is pure. There's no impurity in that, because sin is impurity. This is a myth, but from this myth we learn the important truth that although humans as individuals are impure, humanity itself is pure. And even though individuals have sins, humanity doesn't commit sin because it is pure. So whatever we do in the name of humanity or for the sake of humanity is not a sin. So I mean that you will see that in communism, for example, the slaughter of humans is, justified because in the name of humanity, a lot of crime. And in liberalism, for example, American crimes against Native people, or crimes against black people, or crimes against Latin American people or Middle Eastern people are all forgiven because America is the representative of humanity. And Richard Rorty, for example, says that. He says in one of his little books, I forgot the name right now, but I'm forgetting the name right now, but he says that we Americans are the greatest nation on earth because we are humanity's representative. And one of the things he says is that we have the right to forgive our sins, we Americans, as a nation, as representative of humanity. So this is the fourth point, that humanity is sinless, humanity is pure, and that's why anything which we do for humanity is sinless. Only individuals have crimes. So number 5, Christ's ascension to the heavens, his resurrection, and he is sitting on the right hand or left hand, I don't know, of God. That's a myth according to the life of Jesus. But this myth points to something which is true, and that is the ascension of humanity to perfection. So Christ's ascension basically is a myth which points to an important truth, that humanity will progress to perfection. And that's the essence of a lot of 19th and 20th century utopias. Either they are liberal utopias or communist utopias or nationalist utopias. So nationalist utopia, Nazis and fascists, and communist utopia like Soviet Union and China, and liberal utopias like European utopias, and America is the prime example. And so the Christ ascension basically is point towards the religion of and the promise of glorious future for human progress, or human. And as you know, progress has been the progress and progressives. That has been one of the hallmark of 19th century. Liberalism, socialism, communism, nationalism, and nowadays, people not that upbeat about it due to obvious reason, but still, all our social organization and political organization is based on that very idea. Capitalism is just survived on that basis, and the crimes committed by capitalists and capitalist states are justified on that basis. So life of Jesus had a huge impact at the time, and Nietzsche was one of the people who was hugely influenced by this book, although he also critiqued it later. Not the idea of divinity, but the idea of progress. So probably I'll take Nietzsche's critique of Strauss's book in the next video. Thank you.